This is a Film Stories original podcast.
We made this.
The truth is in here. I'm your host, Sarah Blair, and today I'm joined by author Lauren Forry. Hi, Lauren. How are you?
Hi, Sarah. I'm good. Better than the last time we recorded together and we were both sick.
Yes. I think that we were both feeling better, and this is definitely going to be a fun episode to chat about. We are talking about Season 4's 20th episode, Small Potatoes, which originally aired on April 20th, 1997. 420, baby. In this episode, Mulder and Scully head to a small town in West Virginia to investigate the birds, the bees, and the monkey babies. There's a lot of fun quotes in this epised.
I tried to write them all down. And
I did too, right?
Lost track.
There was a lot of pausing. It's a good thing I've seen this one plenty of times because I had to pause a lot to get the quotes correct. But yeah, thanks to Vince Gilligan who wrote it. And this episode was directed by Cliff Bole. So Vince Gilligan and Cliff Bole, do you know what other episode they teamed up for in the X-Files?
I didn't know this was going to be a quiz.
It was a surprise quiz. It was Bad Blood.
Oh, really? Yeah. Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Doesn't it,
The
though?
humor, yes. Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. It makes so much... I saw that and I was like, oh.
Okay. Yeah.
On IMDb, this episode, at the time of the recording, it had 3,188 votes, and it had a 9.1, which was the second highest rated of the entire season, Season 4. Pop quiz again.
Oh, no.
Can you guess which one is the highest rated?
Season 4?
Yeah.
Well, it's not Sanguinarium.
Definitely not.
I should have studied. I'm lost. I don't know the answer to this question.
All right. I'll tell you. It's the number one rated episode of Season 4 is Musings of a Cigarette Smoking Man.
Ah.
Yes. So this falls right below Musings of a Cigarette Smoking Man, but right above Home. So CSM had a 9.2. Then Small Potatoes gets the 9.1. Then Home gets a 9.0. But interesting thing, Home had over 4,000 votes. So it had over 1,000 more votes.
I would definitely put Home above this one.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And then Synchrony and Zero Sum are the episodes that come before and after this one. And Synchrony was like a 7.6, but Zero Sum is an 8.4, so it's a little bit higher. So this is definitely one of the higher rated towards the end of the season.
Well, it's one of the ones that I remember from first watching it when I was a kid.
Oh,
yeah. When I think of X-Files, I think of the tales and the shape-shifting and...
Yes.
Creepier than I remembered Mulder at the end. Or not Mulder. Not Mulder, actually. But
Eddie Mulder.
Yeah. Creepy Eddie Mulder.
Yeah. So, yeah, right? And this is probably over the years. This was definitely one of my go-to episodes. I prefer the comedy episodes over the darker ones and the standalones over the mythology. So this fell on one of my lists of go-to episodes. So I've probably seen it. Haven't seen it as much as Amanda Nelligan has seen Star Wars, but I've watched it quite a few times because I really enjoy the Mulder and Scully interactions.
It's so good in this episode.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things that when I was rewatching, I'm nitpicking the plot and tearing it apart. I'm like, a lot of this makes sense. Why did I like this so much?
Yes.
And then, but it's Mulder and Scully. It's like top humor, Mulder and Scully. Their chemistry's right on. The one-liners are excellent. Like that makes this whole episode worth it for me.
Absolutely, yeah. So what would you rate it?
If I had to go with like just the Mulder and Scully interaction, I would put it, like 9.5. When you have to factor in the plot, when you actually look at the plot and the glaring potholes and the kind of creepy, rapey aspect of it, that I would give more like a 6.5. So I would say, for me, it would balance out to like an 8.5.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm going to go with that too. Same answer. That's a good answer. Yeah. Well, let's break it down and talk about each episode scene by scene. All right. So in the teaser, we've got Christine Cavanaugh, who plays, we don't know her name yet, but she's a woman in labor. And if you were a kid in the 90s, which I know you were, Lauren, who watched Nickelodeon, you know, were you freaked out when you saw her first? Because I did.
As soon as I heard her voice, I was like, I know that voice. Like, that's a voice from my childhood. And I had to look it up to see exactly the characters. But then, Chucky and Dexter's Lab was like one of my favorites. I was like, but that's... Now you have a human face.
And I don't know if you ever watched Salute Your Shorts, but she played Mona Tibbs, park ranger, on Salute Your Shorts. She dated Ugg. She was Ugg's girlfriend.
Oh!
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. But she was actually on screen in that, so that's how I recognize her, because I was obsessed with that show. Unfortunately, she died in 2014 at age 51, which is super young. But, and I tried to look it up, but I couldn't figure out the cause of death. But, yeah. She was a really prolific actor and voiceover artist.
I mean, you just hear it. She has such a unique voice that you just hear it and it brings back memories.
So I'm glad she got to be in this episode. Definitely a flashback to childhood and pleasant, happy memories. She says the nurse is asking her all these insurance questions. She's like, what about the baby's father? Do you want me to contact him? And she goes, well, I don't know how you would do that. He's from another planet. And she's like, what? So then she gives birth to the baby and everyone freaks out. And we finally find out that the baby has a tail.
Dun, dun, dun.
Plot twist at the very beginning. It's a good teaser. Effective.
It is. I mean, it sets it up, it's an X-Files episode. So it sets it up like, oh, it is going to be like alien babies or something. And then we find out soon later they kind of twist that completely, which is really nice.
Yeah. So after the credits, we get scene 1 with Mulder and Scully in the car. And Scully is reading the same tabloid, World Weekly Inquirer. This is a throwback to Darren Morgan's Fluke Man, because he appeared, the Fluke Man was on that same fake tabloid.
It's a good tabloid.
Scully's explaining the scientific reason for the vestigial tails. And then she throws the bomb that Mulder is like, could it be from visitors from outer space? She's like trying to figure out why he would be interested in this case. Then we've got them going to the hospital to meet Amanda Nell again. And this is probably my favorite scene in the episode. What did you think about this one?
I just, as soon as she said Luke Skywalker, I was like, oh, that's right. Like who, I guess that really would have been, for thinking about it, this episode was what, 97? So judging by her age, yeah, she would have been probably high school when Star Wars came out, around that age. So yeah, it makes perfect sense that it would be Luke Skywalker. And Mark Hamill was pretty fine looking in the first Star Wars, well, the whole original trilogy. So I could definitely see people going for that, or her going for that. I was wondering, I was like, if this was shot today, what actor would they have used?
Oh, that's a good question.
Like, I feel like it would have been maybe one of the Chris's, like a Chris Pine, or Chris Evans, or Chris Pratt, or any of the other, Chris Hemsworth.
Yeah.
But, like, it's like, who would replace Luke? I guess it wouldn't be Luke Skywalker. They would say, like, Thor, or, you know.
Yes.
Something. It would be.
Yeah.
I feel like it would be a Marvel character. Or a new Star Wars, like Kylo Ren. So that's where my brain went when I first saw that scene. It was like, yes, Luke Skywalker, I can see that, but then also, but who now? If you were somebody that's seen something, was it like 398 times?
368. Yes.
368, yeah. And I love Star Wars, and I've not seen it 368 times.
Right? I don't think I've seen any episodes of The X-Files that many times. I might have. I haven't kept count.
It's true.
It's possible, though.
It's very possible. Or
it's possible I've seen Quagmire that many times.
Oh, I was also wondering, why would he... Like, she seems to be not crazy. Like, when we see the later scenes, like, she doesn't seem like a mentally ill person. Like, she seems like a person who should know that Star Wars isn't a documentary. So why did Eddie pretend to be Luke Skywalker and not just pretend to be, like, Mark Hamill or a Mark Hamill look-alike or something?
Right? I don't know.
I guess that's one of those plot holes where it's like, either she should be full-blown crazy and they should bring up the fact that, you know, she thinks Star Wars has actually happened, or...
Yeah.
Because it just seemed really odd that an otherwise kooky but still sane woman would accept that Luke Skywalker was not a fictional character.
Right. Yeah.
But it's really funny.
But it is. It's really funny. Yeah. And I really enjoyed how David Duchovny and Gillian Anderson played this scene, because, you know, Mulder's right there. He's, like, fully invested in this, like usual. And Scully's kind of just hanging back. And then, you know, she's like, it's Luke Skywalker. And Mulder's like, what? You can just see it all over his face. Like, what are you talking about? And then Scully's like trying not to laugh so hard. Like, she's trying so hard to keep it together. And then Christine Cavanaugh just plays it so perfectly. She's just like so straight up, you know, innocent and like honestly like believes this somehow. And Scully is just like, okay. And then Mulder just gets up and walks out. Like, I can't even handle this.
I mean, he was pretty sure it was actual aliens. You could say he had that little hopeful glint in his eye that he has a real alien baby or something with all these occurrences. And she doesn't even, like, it's not even like she mentions little green men or anything or something he could, like, use.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Poor Mulder.
It's Luke Skywalker. And she raises a very interesting question, though. And that is, could Luke be the father of the other babies who were born with tails? Because there's been 4 other babies. So 5 total, including Amanda Nelligan. So then we see Mulder out in the hallway looking at the babies, and Darren Morgan's behind him in his janitor suit, just peeking in there, kind of smiling a little bit. It's been a while since I've seen this episode. So I kind of viewed it with a fresh lens this time around, and it was definitely creepy that he was sitting there looking in, because he knows that's his kid. And this is back when they had the babies in the nursery where you could actually go and look at them.
Oh, they don't do that anymore?
They don't do that. No, they don't do that anymore. I was very surprised when I had my 2 kids, or, well, my first child. I wasn't surprised when I had my second one because I already knew. But, yeah, they don't do nurseries anymore. They let you keep the baby with you.
I have no clue.
Yeah.
I didn't bother to visit my nieces or nephews in the hospital. Not because I don't love them, but because, well, some I was out of the country, but others it was just like, oh, yay, everybody's healthy. I'm going back to sleep.
Yeah.
Call me
Well, I
later.
remember when my cousin was born, and it was like around 97, and we got to, you know, look in on them. But, yeah, somewhere between 2000 and 2012, it changed.
Huh. No, I think this episode might be the reason I don't want kids. I thought of that when I was watching that with the tails and everything, that I definitely probably planted something like, nope. Yeah. Slimy.
Yeah.
Tails. And then the way that they put that, it's a CGI tail, but like have it sticking out, and they're in the diaper when they're in that same scene. So
yes.
it's like I did kind of feel bad for the fake tail baby. I mean, it's a real baby, but with a fake tail.
Right.
like this is a real kid. They're like basically putting on a freak show for, oh, come stare at the tail baby.
I did appreciate that they actually used a new baby.
Yeah.
Or relative, I mean, that was really a new baby. You could tell.
You can always tell with the fake babies. What was it? Mm-hmm. It was the American Sniper movie with Bradley Cooper the other year. And there was a scene where he's supposed to be holding his, infant daughter or something, and it's a doll. And it's clearly a doll. Because I think they had an issue with getting the live child on set, so they had to replace it at the last minute. And it just looks it's so bad. So, yeah. Yeah. My mom always goes there when she watches things like that. She's like, that baby's too big to be a newborn.
Yeah.
You can't use newborns in the TV production or film production.
I know, right? Yeah. So, but that one was definitely a real new baby. I don't know how they managed to get that one, but yeah.
They should have found one with a real fake tail, because that would have been for that touch of realism.
Exactly. So then we cut over to the DNA results, and Scully says that all of the babies share the same father. And this is where we get our first fun quote about the birds and the bees and the monkey babies. And they talk a little bit about that they shared the same obstetrician, with another good quote from Mulder. Birds do it, bees do it, even educated MDs do it. So I guess it helps that they're in a very small town, because there's only one baby doctor
apparently
in the town. Well, only one. He's like a multi-purpose doctor. He does the artificial insemination and fertility and delivering and everything. So they head over to interview the doctor and find out there's an angry mob who has also heard about the latest monkey baby. They're not really monkey babies. They're just tail babies.
Yeah. Get it removed.
Couple of months and then snip. Notice on the way in when the other couple is arguing and he just casually drops the nickname Babu. One of the things that I really appreciate about Vince Gilligan and his writing is how he drops innocuous things in that you don't even notice probably the first time you watch, and then they become important later. And I really appreciate how they kind of, Mulder and Scully are going in and he's like, oh, you too?
Yeah. That's what that made me think, I was like, this is an episode for the shippers.
Yes, absolutely. Remind me, are you kind of shippery or kind of in the middle?
In the middle. It depends on the day. I really appreciate their platonic friendship and the way they work together, and how they're always there for each other. And then some days, especially in the later seasons, when it's like they should be together after all they've been through. Mm-hmm. But I'm not going to force them. Let them make their own choices.
Right. Yeah. That's kind of where I fall. I mean, I'm always about more kissing, but yeah.
You almost get it in this episode. So.
Mm-hmm. So, that's going to be fun to talk about. When they go in, the doctor's trying to calm everybody down, and he kind of realizes that it's very strange that I think he said it was a really low % chance of success with the technique that he used. Or I can't remember if it was 20% or 42% or something. But then he was confused because it worked 100% of the time in each case. So then he was like, well, maybe it wasn't your husband's sperm at all, which was super great to say out loud in front of a bunch of angry women.
And this is what got me about this scene is he seems to be revealing all this personal medical detail
right
in front of other people, including strangers.
Yes.
In the form of Mulder and Scully. I'm just sitting there. I'm like, this is one of the plot things that get me. It was like, he should not be revealing why these families chose artificial insemination.
Yeah.
It would be one thing if they all knew each other from what had happened with their babies and had talked about it before. But Mulder and Scully definitely hadn't been there before, and he's just going off about, their fertility problems.
Yeah. Well, I think this was before HIPAA, so yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, like, the one lady does call him by his first name. So I wonder how, like, being a small town, maybe they just are that familiar with each other. That's the only explanation.
Wait. Sorry, I had to look up HIPAA. HIPAA was 1996.
Oh,
signed by Bill.
So he should have known better.
So he should have known better. So it's possible that Vince Gilligan wasn't aware of HIPAA when he wrote the episode, because it was April 97, so he would have written this in 96. So it's right on the border there.
Yep. That's true. Close.
But it's still, I feel like
maybe it had been passed but not gone into effect yet.
True. Just feel like I guess I know. I would have to ask somebody that was a doctor pre and post HIPAA if you.
That doesn't invalidate doctor-patient confidentiality.
Either way, he's just
yeah.
Let me tell these strangers about your fertility issues, ladies and gentlemen.
That you have slow sperm.
Although this was one of my favorite lines in this episode, which one of the random wives shouts out, "I haven't been with a man since 1989."
Except you, honey.
Yes. Except you, honey. Just a really quick tack on.
Right. Yeah, that's hilarious. That gets me every time. And so I guess Mulder just gets bored with the conversation or something. I don't know. But he decides to wander down the hall and go exploring. And he finds the janitor with his plumber butt hanging out. And guess what? Kawinky dink, he's got a scar. Right.
It is the best use of the plumber butt,
It really is. That's just genius right there. So he just starts casually talking to him. And he's like, "Hey, can I ask you some questions? I'm an FBI agent." He's like, "Sure." He just takes off. And the eye roll is priceless.
You're not going to outrun Mulder. Not Mulder in his prime.
Right?
Eddie Plummer.
Yeah.
Bluhunt.
Exactly.
Van Bluhunt.
Bluhunt. Yeah. Especially with those long Mulder legs he's got. He does his best, but then Mulder tackles him, like, right in front of everybody.
And then he pulls his pants, the poor guy's pants down in front of everybody. Like, I know the guy's a rapist, but...
I mean, considering that he did all this stuff to these women, I don't know. Maybe he deserves to have his butt crack revealed. Like, it was totally revealed way more. So, that was his own fault. He should have gotten a better belt.
True.
Yeah. So they talk to Eddie Van Blunt, and they tell him that he's the father of all 5 babies. And they're revealing this information. They're like, "So you have fathered 5 children?" And he's all like, "Yeah, you got my name spelled wrong." Like, he clearly doesn't give a crap that he has done this. Obviously, he's messed up and a terrible person, like trash human, because he's just made 5 babies and doesn't care. I really do appreciate Darren Morgan's acting in this scene. How did you feel about seeing him in front of the camera?
I forgot who it was him, and then when I went back and rewatched, and the credits at the beginning, I was like, oh, that's right. But yeah, ever since we find out that he's the guy behind it, it's like, oh, I can't look at you. But it's like, it is really good. I think the line that stood out to me in that first interview scene, he's like, "Where's the crime?" And I'm just like, almost started like shouting at the TV. I'm like, what are you talking? The crime and the women and not consenting and what is? Yeah, you're not Luke Skywalker either,
right?
But I think, yeah, he nailed it perfectly. Just he not, like, didn't go overboard, like, with creepy villain aspect. He was just like, all right, I just don't care. Like, I did it.
Yeah.
So what?
Yeah. Exactly. And I did notice when Scully is kind of, like, telling him all this stuff, and then she says, how is it that none of the women have any recollection of this happening? And you can tell he picks up on that, because he kind of, like, blinks a little bit, and he's like, well, if nobody actually knows that it was me, and they don't know that I had sex with them, then I can get away with this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can see his mind working for just that split second, which makes me love Darren Morgan's acting even more. But also, like, you know, and then he's like, well, hypothetically, and you're like, no, dude, hypothetical nothing. You raped 5 women, and you need to go to jail.
Well, this was one plot point that was bugging me. Like, I know the whole point is he can change his face so he looked like the husband, so the wives just thought they were sleeping with their husbands. But they also went to this fertility doctor, and he's talking about how they were inseminated in the clinic. It is never brought up once as a possibility that instead of raping them, he just replaced the husband's sperm with his own in the cup or something.
That's true.
And, like, I was kept waiting for it to be mentioned. Like, why are you not considering that as a possibility? I mean, he did rape them, the face changing thing, but it's never even brought up once that they couldn't think that maybe that was a possibility either, which would have been the less supernatural one that you think like Scully would think of it or something.
Yeah.
But that from that point on, that's one of those plot things that I was watching and I was like, why aren't you mentioning this? Like, that's a glaring plot hole to not even think of the fact that since he was at the clinic himself and working as a plumber probably multiple times, he could have just swapped out the sperm.
To me, that's something like if somebody like actually wanted to help women or something like that, like sure, that would be a gross way to do it. But, you know, he's trying to be all benevolent about it. He's like, well, if they all wanted babies, now they have babies, like, what's the problem? Yeah, it's aggravating.
I mean, obviously he did. He's a total super creep and wants to change faces and sleep with women.
Right.
That are not his wife or girlfriend.
Yeah.
But it should have been mentioned. It should have been. They should have hung a lantern on that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. In the next scene, Mulder says he doesn't have a theory, but then Scully has a theory. And I do appreciate that she does make it clear that she believes they were raped. Only she thinks that he did it with Rohypnol.
Big old drugs of the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
I just remember the Rohypnol warnings everywhere.
Right?
It was the big date rape drug.
Mm-hmm. And then Mulder questions the opportunity they might have had. And we cut over to Eddie Van Blunt, who's getting checked in by this officer at the police station. He's being so creepy, just staring at him.
Yeah.
The officer.
I was like, is he gonna eat him?
Yes. Like he was being all tombsy. Yeah. Just staring at him. I was waiting for his eyes to turn yellow.
Less slimy.
Yeah. And they go through the H is silent. And the guy's like, all right, Mr. Van Blunt, hut. And he's kind of a dick, but he, you know, rightfully so. This guy's...
You rape a bunch of women, I think we can make fun of your last name.
Yeah. And then he knocks him out with the piggy bank. And...
Haha, the cop had a piggy bank.
Exactly.
Sorry.
I'm glad you noticed that too. Oh, so yeah. And then this is one of this next part is one of the ones that I found confusing. I don't know if you have an explanation for this. So the one thing that like gets me in the scene is where the deputy says the guy cold cocked me and ran away. But later on, he says the exact same thing after he attacks Mulder.
Wait, in the same scene? I think it's supposed to be just the cop, because I think Eddie's supposed to have already run off back to his house.
Because it's such a distinctive phrase. He cold-cocked me.
Could be just Vince Gilligan repeating a line of dialogue that he didn't realize. Or because, Eddie's from the same town as this cop, so maybe it's just a local... I think they say it's West Virginia. So whatever this small town in West Virginia is, maybe that's just kind of the slang people use.
That's true.
It's very old-fashioned.
That would make sense. But every single time I hear that, it bugs me. Because I'm very particular about that in my writing. So I didn't know if that was supposed to be a hint or if it was just something that slipped through.
I know I've done it unintentionally a lot. Like, I do line edits. I was doing a story recently, and I had a character say one thing, and then I realized I had another character say the same exact phrase later. I'm like, damn it.
Yeah, so you get it.
It's like, I can't do that twice.
So they go out in the hall, and then another one of my favorite lines, Mulder's like, I finally have a theory if you want to hear it. And then Scully's like, Eddie Van Blunt somehow physically transformed into his captor and walked out the front door, leaving no one the wiser. And Mulder's like, should we be picking out China patterns or what?
So I wrote that one down. I have it.
Yes.
Yes, you should, Mulder.
Mulder mentions that they've both seen the shape-shifting happen before, but he doesn't think it's aliens in this case, which is a throwback to the alien bounty hunter guy who could change form.
With the other great quote as he's talking about it, not unless they have trailer parks in space.
Yeah.
Burn, Eddie.
Ouch. So then I love this little conversation where they're talking on the way from the car to the door. And Mulder's, asking her, if you could be anybody else, who would you be? And she comes up with the most Scully answer. Hopefully myself. He's so annoyed with her.
Scully's a confident woman. She doesn't need to be anybody else.
Right? She's a medical doctor.
Yeah, and an FBI agent. She doesn't need to transform.
Exactly. So
Please, Mulder.
I was wondering who Mulder might be.
That's true, because he presses her for an answer, and then she eventually gives Eleanor Roosevelt. But then he cheats it. He's like, well, he can't be somebody dead. Like, you can't keep changing the rules, Mulder.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, I don't think she really cares who Mulder would turn into, so she doesn't ask.
Yeah.
But be a good. I feel like Mulder would want to transform into some like higher up government official so he could get access to secret files, like
the president.
Yeah, turn into Bill Clinton.
Right.
Since it's 97, turn into Bill Clinton and to find out the truth about like Area 51 and
right. Yeah.
What else he could.
Who shot JFK? Yeah.
Which
the lone gunman actually
I know,
find
we hear
out,
about later on that awesome answering machine.
Oh, that's
later.
priceless, yeah. So he does, Scully has an interesting point, though. She says looking like someone else and being someone else are two completely different things. And Mulder says ultimately maybe it's other people's reactions to us that make us who we are, which is an interesting point. And
it's true. I
think it's nice when he actually uses his psychology degree from Oxford.
You always forget he has that.
So, yeah. An interesting note, apparently, there have been people and X-Files fans who thought the leaf blower guy, when they are going in, they thought that the leaf blower guy was Mark Hamill. But it's not. It's
really?
just some dude. But
I thought it's supposed to be like, ooh, could that be Eddie?
That's what I thought too. Cause
posing as a leaf blower, but I didn't think he looked like Mark Hamill.
Although, like, after I read that and I watched it, I'm like, oh, he kind of does. I mean, sort of. I never would have thought it before if I hadn't been looking for it, but yeah. But I mean, it's such a interesting cut and random cut that it's like, it feels like it should be important, but it's not. Which is, But, yeah, Vince Gilligan had admitted that it was a missed opportunity. He's like, it should have been Mark Hamill. That would have been great. Should have gotten him to do that. But, yeah, so I thought that was an interesting little side note. They don't even knock on the door. because he just opens it. The Eddie Sr., who's played by Lee DeBrew, who has been, like, in tons of stuff. I had no idea who he was, that he was a prolific actor. Like, started all the way back from, like, Bonanza and all through the years. Yeah, character actor. He's a great actor. But yeah, so they go in and kind of, like, see this house, and he's very animated. And asks them if they want to see his tail. And Scully's like, no, thank you. But yeah, and then they are talking to him, and he's going on about Eddie, and then he accidentally slips and calls him Mulder. And Mulder's like, hey, I never gave you my name. And he realizes they've been talking to Eddie Jr. the whole time. So they chase him out, and he gets away. There's, like, suddenly lots of people out in the neighborhood.
Of course, because any of them could be Eddie.
Right. Dog walking, leaf blowing, busy neighborhood all of a sudden. And then Eddie, I guess the couple from the obstetrician's office is a neighbor because he runs to their house.
And that bothers me too. There's no explanation for why he's in the midst of this. He knows that the FBI's after him. Why he turns back into the husband of one of his victims and goes to their house.
Yeah.
Like, dude, you can turn into anybody, including Luke Skywalker.
Yeah.
And that's what you back yourself into a corner like that?
Another thing that I thought was super gross is that he remembers her nickname.
I think of, like, how long he's been, like, watching these people and, like, learning their habits so that he can fake the husbands well enough. He obviously knows where they live.
Yeah. So, like, at the very least, he probably could have heard them talking in the fertility clinic. But still, like, that's premeditation. That's nasty. Then we cut back to Mulder and Scully at the Van Blunt house, and Mulder finds a dead skeleton up in the attic with the quicklime, and there's a big crash, and he's like, I'm all right, and she's like, what? He could have just been, like, attacked. It doesn't matter, it's fine. She's like, yeah.
It's all fine.
And then he comes down, they find him, and Mulder with his Mulder jokes. He's like, you think the fall killed him? Oh, Mulder. Then we've got back to Eddie Van Blunt in the bathroom, and the husband comes home, and they're freaked out. And Eddie changes into Mulder, and they're all like, oh, of course. Like, okay, that annoys me so much.
How
right?
dumb can you be? Like, your bathroom, it doesn't look like it has any windows that are... like, how would Mulder get in the bathroom?
Yeah. Well, she's like... Apparently he, like, sweet-talked his way into convincing her that he had been Mulder the whole time? Or something?
I mean, he must be good at persuasion. And he's had all this practice being other people, other husbands, and, like, faking his way through. So it must be one of his disturbing talents.
Yeah. He's very charismatic. Good at gaslighting people and, like, probably convincing them that what they think they saw isn't what they actually saw. So, because he's a psychopath, essentially. And let's see. So Scully's doing the autopsy on Van Blunt Sr. And he calls him Eddie the Monkey Man. And this is actually, I was watching this episode and I was stuck on my book, Darkness Shifting. I didn't know how to, like, make it interesting, and I didn't know what I wanted the bad guys to be, really. And I was like, ooh, what if they were shifters? So this is the moment. I was watching this episode, and that's the moment where I got the idea to do shifters in my book.
Nice.
Yeah. So it's kind of a special episode. And so she's talking about how they have this thin layer of voluntary muscle tissue over his entire body. So that's how he can change form.
See, but how does that work with skeletal structure, though? That's what I always want to
Right?
know. I can see the muscle changing, or even color changing, but you can't change your bone structure with muscle.
Yeah. So, like, how does he get taller and shorter? And, yeah.
Right.
This is one of the episodes where we probably shouldn't ask too many questions.
We're not going to ask too many questions.
We're just going to go with it.
What we should focus on in this scene is the fact that Mulder breaks off the dead Eddie Sr.'s tail.
Right.
And then, in great physical comedy, you know, while Scully's going off, Mulder's just trying to put the tail back on, or hide the fact that, as like a child, he touched something and broke it, and is trying to cover that up.
Sometimes I wonder if he somehow is Eddie Van Blunt. But then at the end, you know, he says all those big words and the FBI terms and, like, MO and this and that. Like, he's too smart to be Eddie Van Blunt. But he's kind of almost too dumb to be Mulder, if that makes sense. I don't know. This scene kind of, like, I love it because it's hilarious, but at the same time, kind of throws me off a little bit, I think. But maybe I should just appreciate the humor of it and continue with my life.
Maybe. It is what it, like, a lot of the humor episodes, it's like that. You lose a little bit of the regular characterization to get the humor.
Yeah. And I think another part about why it makes me think that is because they cut straight to Mulder Van Blunt, Eddie Van Mulder. Is that what we're going to call him now? I don't know. But it is him. So you've got Mulder acting weird in the autopsy. And then it cuts to fake Mulder going in to talk to Amanda Nelligan. So I think maybe that cut kind of throws me off too, because it could just be him. If it is Eddie Van Blunt, it could just be him going down the hall at the hospital to talk to Amanda Nelligan, because he's there. And
this is the great scene between fake Mulder and Amanda Nelligan, because it starts off like you feel like it's just Mulder. Like, Eddie Van Blunt just turned into Mulder to, like, get out of that house. So we knew Mulder said that he's going to go talk to Amanda Nelligan again, because she's the only one that wasn't at the fertility clinic. So there must have been some other connection between her and Van Blunt, which makes sense to pursue. And it starts off like a normal interview. And then it's great because she starts talking about how she knew Eddie Van Blunt in high school and how these were all his terrible qualities. And this is just great with David Duchovny's acting. Just his face, like, you can start to see it and you realize the way he's reacting. It's Eddie. Like, you know, trying not to get, you know, shout out or, like, say something, just keep his mouth shut. It's like, well, he must have had some good qualities, right? And it's like how, you know, it's just like, I think David Duchovny plays that scene perfectly. It's just like the gradual realization that it's not Mulder.
Yeah.
And seeing Eddie's reactions in Mulder's face to all this horrible stuff from his ex-girlfriend.
Yeah. Mulder playing Eddie playing Mulder.
Yeah.
It's very meta. And then, of course, she says, "May the force be with you." Yeah, that's super. And then we've got the real Mulder coming in, and he figures out what just happened. And he goes out in the hall and he's like, "I was just here. Where did I go?" And he chases him down into the men's locker room and tries to arrest the security guard. But then the OB comes in and drops his towel, and you're like, what is even happening right now? And then Eddie jumps on him he's in the ceiling, apparently, hiding.
Where else would you hide? In the
Right.
men's locker room.
Yeah. And somehow or another, with the doctor and the security guard handcuffed, he gets Mulder down into the basement with snacks.
He did bring him snacks. I mean, that was,
Yeah.
I guess, nice.
But none of the two guys even saw that happen.
Look, we can ignore that plot hole again. Because the next scene has Skinner in it.
Yes.
We'll just ignore that. They got confused. There was steam in the bathroom.
Right. It was the steam.
The steam.
But that's the part where he says he cold cocked me again.
Yeah. I think that's just a
Yeah.
Gilligan repeating a line.
Yeah. And then, so yeah, we've got Skinner.
With one of my favorite Skinner lines ever. It's like, when they're talking about Mulder's report, and he's like, who wrote this? Mulder's like, I did. You spelled Federal Bureau of Investigation wrong. It was a typo. Twice.
He's so perfect.
I just love that.
So perfect. Yep. And I love how vehement that Eddie Mulder is that he's not a murderer. But he's not a murderer. He didn't kill his dad.
But he was a rapist.
Yes.
Which they do make a point of saying multiple times in this episode.
Yeah. Well, Skinner's the only one to say it outright, to actually,
That's
like,
true.
but he is a rapist. Like, he very plainly says that. Yeah. So, like, Scully kind of hints around at it, but they don't call him that outright. Skinner's the only one who actually outright called him what he is. So go Skinner. And, you know, they mention that they're looking for him and he's going to be caught soon. And he has that, like, terrible look on his face. You're just like, oh. David Duchovny gets that, like, sour grin on his face. And he's like, so that's it. All right. We're done here. And they're walking down the stairs and he so creepy, awkward pats her on the back. And it's like, oh, gross. I'm like, what you doing this weekend? I'm like, oh, man, could you be more of a lech, please? Like, ugh. Gross.
I know, I'm staying away from you. That's what she should be doing.
Exactly. Yeah.
I said that every time he's Eddie Mulder on his own, like, I was laughing at all the stuff he does. But then every time he was interacting with Scully as Eddie Mulder, I'm like, no, stop. Stop. Get away from her.
Yeah.
And I guess that's testament to David Duchovny, because it was him, but him playing creepy, shape-shifting rapist version of him. So...
And I mean, it kind of bugs me that she's so, like, she doesn't notice, but she's so involved in, like, her paper and, you know, talking about the diminished acetylcholine production in the recidivist offenders. But...
I mean, he doesn't do anything that's, like, so, at this point, that's so bizarre that would stand out if, you know, you're only paying half attention. Like I said, like, this guy knows what he's doing when it comes to impersonating other people.
And I kind of like the idea that, you know, Mulder would, like, put his hand on her back or whatever. Like, not awkwardly, creepily pat her like that, but, you know, like, it isn't uncommon for him to, you know, put his hand on her back while they're walking.
Yeah. No, especially not at this point. I mean, they've been working together 4 years. They've gone through a lot already. So
yeah. So she's so involved with her paper, she doesn't even notice that he can't find the right key to the office. And did you notice, I don't know if you noticed this, but Mark Snow's music right here has the tiniest hint of Star Wars to it, if you listen really close.
I need to go back and re-listen to it now.
Yeah. Like, if you listen really carefully, it's got that little lilting Star Wars-y sound to it, which I thought was very clever. Because Mark Snow is awesome. And so we've got Eddie Mulder exploring the office, lots of physical comedy, falling over in the chair. And he said, I love that he says, "Good night." I say that all the time. And not because of this, but because of, like, my aunt,
sure?
my family used to say it. Yeah. But then he goes to the apartment. He's like, "Where the hell do I sleep?" Which is kind of a running joke. Because Vince Gilligan wrote Dreamland, where he, gets the waterbed and all that. It's pretty funny.
I love the whole sequence with the answering machine. Because first of all, tape answering machines. Hello. But then we get to hear the lone gunman and, like, bringing up theories about JFK. I told you, what else do they talk about? Like ordering pizza or something? Cheesesteak.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I love it.
You can't get a good cheesesteak in DC. I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway.
You'll never believe where the third shot came from. Tell him about the cheesesteaks. Oh, yeah.
And then
He's such a geek.
And that's what he says. He's like, geeks for friends.
Yeah. And then you've got the porno call.
Phone sex operator.
Chantal.
What I want to know, is that because Mulder's called there before, or is it just a blind phone sex telemarketer?
She calls him Marty.
It's true, but that's the name he could have given.
That's true.
Would you think Fox Mulder would give his real name? Of course.
No.
Nobody would probably believe that his first name was Fox and calling a phone sex operator, so.
I think they're definitely, like, calling him back.
I think they're calling him back.
Yeah. And then we've got David Duchovny impersonating Darren Morgan, impersonating Robert De Niro. Oh, it's good stuff. So then he goes over to Scully's apartment.
No! So yeah, I was laughing. I was enjoying the sequence in the mirror and him being alone in the apartment.
Yeah.
And then I couldn't laugh anymore. And I had to just close.
And you've got that infamous smile.
Ugh.
Yeah.
And it's like, I know I've seen the episode before. I know that Mulder is going to come through at the real Mulder is going to come through at the last minute and nothing's going to happen. But it's still really.
Yeah. And I don't know. I kind of feel like maybe this was a way to give the shippers kind of what they were demanding, but without giving it to them, actually. I don't know. Because we get to, like, even though it is gross Eddie, we still get to kind of pretend that it's Mulder and Scully flirting and having wine.
And that's how I was thinking, this is so unfair to the shippers, because...
Oh, yeah.
It's not just any random dude shape-shifting as Mulder. It's a creepy, at least 5-time rapist.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to mess with Scully.
Yeah.
And she's not gonna know.
It's not fair. I think that she does kind of notice that he's acting weird. But Mulder is the person... That's what really irks me about this. Mulder is the one person that she trusts the most in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, she's not going to question him too much.
Yeah. And this guy knows that.
Mm-hmm. Just makes that extra evil.
But I do like she figured, like, as soon as Mulder bursts down the door, like, she doesn't even have to pretend who's the real Mulder. Like,
right.
She knows.
Yeah.
She just leaps off that couch.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, yeah, super surprised. And then he changes back and he gives that, like, half shrug. Like, and it's like, you can tell he's like, well, what did you expect me to do? This is like me. I can't help myself.
Ugh.
Had to try.
Ugh.
So nasty.
It's gross.
Yuck. So then, yeah. And do you think, in season 11, do you think having Reggie come back and shoot him was, like, a way to, like, just really be like, this is what we should have done?
I think so.
This is what he deserved.
Because I feel like they've had a lot of comments on that
Mm-hmm.
over the years. That was a nice moment. Oh,
It really was.
Reggie.
It was very satisfying. Yeah. So after this, we got Mulder going to see Eddie at the correctional facility. And I guess Eddie, like, requested him to come there. And he still can't help being a lech about Scully. It's like, oh, Scully here? I'm like, dude, come on.
And then what bugs me, though, because he's, like, talking about, basically making fun of Mulder's life and, like, how he should, like, get out and do stuff more. And it looks like Mulder's considering it. And I'm sitting there like, Mulder, don't take advice from a rapist. Like, that is not the person you should be taking life advice from.
Right?
You know, this isn't your chance to, like, you know, grow as a person yourself, Mulder, because some rapist, you know, almost slept with your partner. Like, do not listen to this man. If you just want to eat cheesesteaks with the lone gunman and talk about the JFK assassination and listen to phone sex operators, and you just live your best life, Mulder.
Exactly. Yep. And then Scully goes out. She goes, I don't imagine you need to be told this, Mulder, but you're not a loser. And he says, yeah, but I'm no Eddie Van Blunt either, am I?
But that's a good thing.
Yes, exactly.
But he kind of, the way it's framed, it's like...
He's disappointed.
No, you don't.
Do you think it's kind of a throwback to the peg leg thing and the conversation on the rock? Where he feels like if he had a peg leg, that he would feel less inclined to chase after aliens, and he would just consider it like a reason to survive. Like if he just had like this shape-shifting ability, that would just be enough for him.
I think even if he could shapeshift, I mean, he still wouldn't find what he was looking for.
He'd still be calling Chantal.
Chantal sounded very nice. She sounded very professional. And she makes a really good money because she talks about how they just reduced their rate.
Well, that's it. That's how the episode ends. It's kind of a, that's all there is to it.
There's really no point to the last 15 minutes of that episode except to watch David Duchovny pretend to be Darren Morgan pretending to be David Duchovny. I mean, that's like... And
almost kissing
Scully.
I
mean, the entire whole plot disappears as soon as he takes over. They just kind of... no real motive. He just did it. We'll track him down. And here's Eddie Van Blunt being Mulder for the next ending 15 minutes of the show.
Yeah. And somehow it's still kind of entertaining.
Well, the humor is so good. I mean, the one-liners, it's not one of those episodes that is trying to be funny and kind of fails, which a couple I've talked about on here. I mean, this one, even though it has if you really examine the plot, there's a lot of holes and it's weak and there's just points that don't make sense. But if you just watch it to enjoy the humor, it's so enjoyable.
Well, let's find out what some of the people in our X-Cast basement, our fan group, had to say about the episode. So Michael says, it isn't my favorite Gilligan script, and I actually think he's better at writing serious episodes. With that said, it still is a classic, in my opinion, and it does a great job making some interesting observations about Mulder's life. Eddie is a monster, but he's a human monster. Vince really loves to write stories about little men who wish they were big, one of David's best performances. I would agree with that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I do love Vince Gilligan's themes, like Just Sweat and, yeah. Marlene says, Small Potatoes doesn't hold up for me. A lot of the humor in this and other Vince Gilligan comedies comes from his blue-collar white people are losers trope. Eddie Van Blunt and Amanda Nelligan set the low standard for that. The Silent H gag is amusing, though not as much so as when the episode was new. I really like the discussion Mulder and Scully have about other people's perceptions, making us who we are, and how that affects their identities toward each other. I think it's interesting that Scully chose Eleanor Roosevelt as the person she would be if she could be someone else. I mean, it's a good role model. Yeah. Eleanor Roosevelt. I wouldn't mind being her.
I'm surprised she wouldn't go. Yeah. Scully didn't pick a scientist. Like a
That's
famous.
True.
But and she's also, works for the government, so She believes in America.
Mm-hmm. Paige says, one of the episodes faring the worst after the Me Too movement. This was so popular at the time, but if taken in the context originally given, it's still pretty entertaining. One, or should they be two, of David's best performances on the show. And Darren Morgan did a great job as Eddie. It's a role explicitly calling him a loser, but he performed it with great subtlety, so he didn't seem like a stock X-Files villain. Yeah. Sarah Ford says, this one was pretty long, so if you want to read the whole one, you can check it out in the basement. As far as this episode goes, I feel like it's one of the weaker comedy episodes. It feels a bit more situation-driven than character-driven. And what makes something like Bad Blood so funny is our understanding of Mulder and Scully. What makes Morgan's work so funny is the way that he gets gut-level honest about asking deep questions and finding absurdity and contradictions in humanity. But in my opinion, the humor of Small Potatoes is driven by its concept, and I never find that type of humor as entertaining as other types. So yeah. Thank you, Sarah, for that comment. Kurt says, David Duchovny is exceptional in this episode, with him playing Eddie, playing Mulder. Seems to bring the best in him, from small character moments to humorous slapstick. His ability to portray both Mulder and Eddie is seamless, and I also really enjoy the insight into Mulder's failings as a person that Eddie is able to use to his advantage. As a viewer, it's nice to see that there is a depth to our main characters, and that we all know he is a very flawed individual. Every time I watch it, I tend to reflect on my own character flaws, and his great episode can do that while at the same time being an enjoyable, funny watch. And Natalie says, this is one of my go-to rewatchable episodes. David Duchovny as Eddie is very funny. And will all the tail babies be shapeshifters, I wonder? I wonder that too.
That's a good question. And again, something else that they never really discuss.
Yeah.
That as a possibility.
See, that, you need to write that for an anthology episode, right? The grown-up tail babies.
I mean, we're talking...
as teenagers. That's like a whole book.
I mean, if we were setting it in present day, they wouldn't be even teenagers, right? I mean, I still feel like 1997 was only 10 years ago, but it wasn't. It was like, what,
right.
21?
Oh,
22?
They could drink now. The tail babies could drink.
And there's 5 of them, at least.
Yeah.
You know? So, they're all half-siblings.
Mm-hmm.
What do they do? Yeah. But now, so they weren't raised around Eddie Van Blunt, which is helpful.
Right.
So.
But they have to know each other in a small town. They're all going to go to the same school.
They know each other. 20.
Let's write the book, Lauren. Let's do it.
The Millennial Tail Babies.
Okay, guys. Yep. We're off to, maybe by the time this episode actually airs, we'll have it written.
Clearly one has to be evil. Obviously.
Mm-hmm. One of them's going to take after Dad.
It's inevitable. 1 in 5 chance.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Or maybe they just all go see Star Wars. Episode...
They're all Star Wars fans.
8, 9. What are we up to?
I don't even know anymore.
They all went to see The Last Jedi together.
Right.
Mark Hamill.
Yeah. Guys, thanks for putting up with us. Lauren, do you have, where can we find you online?
You can find me on Twitter at Lauren A. Forry, LaurenaForry. And then a lot of my recent stuff you can find over at brickmoonfiction.com.
Awesome. And as always, I'm Sarah L. Blair, SarahLBlair on Twitter. I'm also over on the Facebook group quite a bit. But, yep. Thanks for listening, folks. We appreciate you as always. Till next time, trust no one.
The X-Cast, an X-Files podcast, is produced and hosted by Tony Black, alongside a dedicated team of podcasters and X-Files fans. You can find the show on Twitter at the X_cast, on Facebook by typing in the Xcast, or inside our group, the X-Files Basement, an Xcast podcast fan group, plus on Instagram by typing in the XFcast. If you're a fan of the show, why not support us on Patreon? Exclusive bonus episodes, early access to new episodes, plus become part of our Xcast community in the Patreon department. To see our monthly subscription options, just head to patreon.com/the Xcast. That's patreon.com/the Xcast. We'd love to see you join our Patreon community. We're also part of the We Made This podcast network at We Made This Pod on Twitter and We Made This on Facebook. You can find a range of shows on TV, film, music and popular culture in general on the network. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.